So they call me and say, Mr. Wrenn, we're gonna have to call your loan. I said, you talking about the land loan? He said, yeah. And I said, well, where's Mike and where's Al, the people that were running the whole state of North Carolina? Well, they're no longer with us.
All right, episode 34, I believe, of the Deal Ranch podcast. Ray Wrenn, thank you for hosting me here in your home. Really excited to get to meet you. You've quite an accomplished developer. You have an amazing community that's underway now, and you guys have completed a good bit of it, that being Bowen. We're on the national championship team for Clemson in 1981. So I'm excited to hear about your career and your life, but I'll let you give an overview of it as the founder of the Wrenn Group. So do you want to give a little intro on yourself, Ray?
Yeah, Matt, thanks for that. My name is Ray Wrenn. The company that we operate under now is called the Wrenn Group. Wonder where we got that name. And the Wrenn Group is a company that primarily designs, builds, and ultimately manages communities, whether they be mixed-use communities, traditional neighborhood designs, apartment communities. And that's kind of what we do. You mentioned Clemson. Yes, I graduated in 84. I was a backup quarterback on the 1981 team, and people ask me, well, who are the famous people on that team? Well, we had a lot of people on that team that played long careers in the NFL. I think there were at least 12 guys on that team that played at least 5 years in the NFL. I don't remember all their names. I remember a lot of them. But the one a lot of people recognize is the Refrigerator Perry. He came in the same time that I came into Clemson. So I was a scout team quarterback, and he was a All-American nose guard. So I got to let's just say, get up close and personal with him on a daily basis. So those were good years. Graduated from Clemson in 1984. And I think I told you before, I had a couple decades intense waste management business, there's all types of waste management companies, but the one that we had, that our family had, and that even after my father retired, he was involved with me early on, but even after I stayed in it and found some other excellent partners. But we had the trucks and the dumpsters, and we would have trucks that would go in the neighborhoods and pick up the residential trash, and then we had the big roll-off containers that would pick up the industrial compactors or construction debris. You see the big containers on construction sites, and then there's the sort of commercial piece, which is the front loader trucks, where they kind of drive right up to the dumpster and lift it over the truck's head and dump it down. So those were the three parts of that business that we were in. And we privatized a lot of small, medium-sized cities and counties, primarily those in South Carolina, and we covered about a third of the state of South Carolina, and provided, all of those services that I mentioned to the private sector as well as to the governmental entities, including municipalities, counties, and also military and other governmental contracts or installations, I should say. And that was a fun business. And I started kind of easing out of that business and easing into the real estate business in the late 1990s. That's kind of when we did that, when we started the real estate stuff.
So was the waste management was a family business? So you went into it right after college, or what was your transition into?
Yes, I've told this story before, not to you, but I graduated on a Saturday. I was a very, very good college student, not meaning that my grades were good, but I was really good at staying in college. And so I graduated on a Saturday, and my father said, well, son, why don't you go to Myrtle Beach, take you a couple weeks off? And I said, no, Dad. I've been in college, and it's time for me to do something productive. So we drove my Chevrolet Monza home from Clemson to, at that time, my parents were living in Columbia, South Carolina, and we unloaded the Monza that Saturday afternoon, and I started working the following Monday morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a long 20 years, and very rewarding. I think Dad and I had 4 companies together throughout the Southeast, and And then I partnered up with some other people, some other people that I'd met along the way that for whatever reason they wanted a partner in the business. So I developed a company that I called Wastelight, and that company would provide capital and consulting to these companies in return for some level of ownership. Wow. And so, so the things that I learned in the first part of my waste management career, I parlayed that into not having to be accountable for the day-to-day operations like I did early on, but to just provide guidance for people that were newer in the business or maybe less experienced in the business than I was. And that was a nice, fun run too. But I got tired of that too. And so the real estate thing kind of came along, and I liked what I heard, and decided I was going to kind of sink my teeth into it. And eventually realized it was probably something I'd be doing the rest of my life.
So what was the longevity of the waste management business? So out of school in '84 until how long were you? You said 20 years?
Yeah. Well, I technically only a couple of years ago just sold out my interest in two of the companies that were started a number of years ago. But it started, and my father started the business around 1979, 1980, right when I was getting out of high school and going into college. And then I joined him about 4 years in, and I think he had 3 or 4 garbage trucks at that point. And then the company started growing. He wanted the help. He needed the help. And together we made quite a team. It was very rewarding. My dad was very, very smart. He wasn't college educated, but he was one heck of a salesman, and people gravitated to him and people respected him instantly. And he was very honest and very dedicated, very passionate about what he did. And he passed all that on to me and said, whatever you learned up there at Clemson, bring those textbooks with you, son. We could use some of that too. So that's what I did.
So what was the transition to the real estate business, and what year was that, you said? I'm guessing a little bit here, but I believe that the spark, I know that the spark happened when I was playing golf with two really well-known Clemson as well as NFL athletes, the Bostic brothers, they call them. Jeff played for the Redskins for 14 years, and Joe played for the Cardinals. And Jeff was either in his last year or he had finished his last year for the Redskins, and that's when we were actually playing golf here at Wild Dunes. And they knew that my father and I had sold the companies that he was involved in, that my father had retired, and that I was not working, 80 hours a week anymore, that I had time on my hands. And they asked me, what are you going to do with your time? And Joe had, with an injury, had to retire after about, I think, 11 years with the Cardinals. So Jeff played another 4 or so years in the NFL after Joe did. But Joe had attended a class at a technical college in Greensboro, North Carolina. And with that degree that he got, I think it was a 2-year class, construction class, and the way that the permitting and licensing worked in North Carolina, if you have that degree and you pass the test, you could be a general contractor, virtually an unlimited general contractor. So Joe met and became acquainted and employed the services of a guy named Mel Morris, and Mel was absolutely the production guru. He could probably build a 24-unit apartment building as fast and as inexpensively as anybody in the country could. And so Joe teamed up with Mel. Mel brought the experience. Joe brought the capital, and along with other banking and other relationships. And they built, while Jeff was playing for the Redskins, they built their first apartment community in Greensboro, and sold it for, a very nice profit. I don't think they were building it to sell it, but somebody came and offered them quite a bit more than they had in it. And so they were talking to me at Wild Dunes playing golf that day. They told me the metrics of that deal that they did, and they each had a home, still do, in Wild Dunes and here in Charleston, Isle of Palms. And so I began over the next year or so looking for some land and learning the business. I bought a couple books about apartment development. I interviewed and spoke with a lot of people in Charleston that were either realtors that might sell land for apartments, and I talked to several property management companies. Yeah.
show me how the books look. What is a healthy balance sheet? What is a healthy income statement? What are the metrics? We use metrics in every industry. We had our metrics in the waste management business. And so what are the metrics that I need to dial into and focus on? And met a good dozen people in Charleston and in the Southeast that sort of taught me enough to get comfortable. So we together started acquiring land in Charleston and Columbia, and we started building apartment communities. And that started probably I'm going to say in 1998 is when we really started doing something in the apartment business. With me and the Bostics, anyway.
Got it. What size deals were those? Were those apartments, and what was kind of the business plan for them? Was it to lease them up and sell them? Was it shorter hold, or was it to keep them for a long time?
Well, the Bostics have always been wonderful partners, and they've let me be the sort of the managing partner of all the LLCs. You set up an LLC typically for each of those entities, and it does its own bank loan. It has its own books, and that's just kind of the model that the attorneys and other people advise us how to operate in terms of establishing the entities and how to go about those types of things. But so the first property we built was 288 apartments. And before that one was done, we had another 312 maybe apartments under construction. And before that one was done, we had another 250. So I got real good at borrowing money. We had to borrow a lot of money in the waste management business, because the garbage truck and all the dumpsters cost a lot of money. You have to have that capital. But no, you borrow a lot more in the garbage business. But I always tell everybody I haven't found an apartment building with wheels on it yet. And when you put wheels on something, it starts moving around.
Yeah.
And you're not driving it. Someone else, that you're relying on their safety and the expertise to drive it. Wheels makes things complicated. So the thing I liked about the apartment and development business is that it didn't have any wheels on the buildings, and not as nearly as many metaphorically and literally moving parts as running a waste management business. Waste management business was far more complicated, had to have a lot more systems. And running apartments has gotten to be very sophisticated too. But I might have mentioned this before, but we outsource all of our management. So we don't take on any management responsibilities. We stay in as the asset manager, and the asset manager manages the actual property. Actually manages the property management company.
That's right.
So that's how that works. So that was I guess that probably occupied the first 4 to 5 years is jumping into about 800 units total in 3 communities.
So the first one would have been Riverland Woods, then the second one Atlantic Palms.
Correct.
In that order.
Yeah.
Okay. What'd you learn from those deals after doing them? Hey, I wanted to stay multifamily. I mean, obviously that's what happened, but what did you learn from the first deal and to getting into the second deal?
One of the things about the apartments, and I'm only equating my experience up until that point, until when that happened, was it didn't command my attention every day, every hour of every day. In the waste management business, if you wake up and you've got 60, 75 routes running in three or four states, that's a lot to say grace over every day, and especially if you're the person of last resort. With the apartment business, you rely on the engineer to put his stamp on the plans to do a credible job. You rely on your general contractor to do their job. So it's not like I'm running an entity with a lot of employees anymore. And sometimes I call that the babysitting business. But there's always challenges with HR, and it's gotten more and more sophisticated, more regulated. But even back then, running that, having 150 or so employees, required your 7, 8 day, 6 or 7 day a week attention, typically 15 to 20 hours a day. And I liked that about. I really felt a relief, and even though I was borrowing more money and taking more risk on paper, because these loans that we were signing were recourse loans. Mm-hmm. There are ways to borrow money to build apartments and other commercial buildings in a non-recourse way, but they come with their pros and cons. So we were still, when I say we, myself, the Bostic brothers, and my father was in as a minority partner on these deals. I kind of brought him in with me. yeah, we really, I really like that business, and I like the fact that I could actually have a life other than that. You can work as many hours as you want to. Mm-hmm. So when you own your own business, my dad used to tell me, you get to work as many hours as you want to. Yeah. So there's always something to do, but it's not like you don't have a choice. You're not drug into everything every single minute of every single day. I also like the fact that if you own apartment buildings, just like with owning your personal home, you're going to have a mortgage. Mm-hmm. You know, it's going to be a big fat mortgage, but just like your home, you pay that mortgage off over time. You get tax deductions on the interest expense and other expenses related to running that entity. So it has a lot of the qualities of the good old American dream, which is home ownership. One of the good old American dreams. Starting your own business is another one, but home ownership is kind of the foundation. But, you know, it's like owning a bunch of homes. Somebody else is just paying the rent. For whatever reason in their life, they're choosing to rent instead of purchase a home. They're there. And there's a lot of people, you know, in our society of all spans, all demographic levels that choose or for other reasons are required, for lack of a better word, to be renters. But I like the fact that you could build equity, which means you're building your personal balance sheet, you're building your company balance sheet up. Again, not as many moving parts. You get a good staff on site. They can really make it sing. They can take care of your customers. They can take care of your expenses. And the turnover is not as bad as it was in the garbage bins. There's always turnover. You know, you want there to be turnover, a healthy amount of turnover in your business. And you want people that work for you to be able to move up and get promoted, maybe for jobs that other people might offer them that you're not able to offer them because your company's not in a unique position to do that. So no, the right people formula, the right builders, a healthy amount of borrowing, not over borrowing. When we call that leverage, not over levering the apartment buildings or communities. You can withstand cyclical periods of time in the marketplace, where market forces to some extent are out of our reasonable control. They are cyclical in the real estate business, just like any other industry. Mm-hmm. But if you keep your debt service, your break-even point, some people think of the break-even point, if you keep your break-even point low enough and you don't overextend your debt and overspend in your properties, then you can keep them for a very long time and possibly even pass them on to future generations, which is kind of what my motive is. That's kind of the way that we operate. Is we try to keep the properties. We still own Riverland Woods, and we still own those.
So what was the capital structure between you and those partners on that first deal? Like, were you the balance sheet because you had all of capital from the waste management business, or what was the what were the roles between the three of you, so to speak?
Well, back in the late 90s, it wasn't uncommon for a bank to loan 95% of the cost of a project. So I think we built Riverland Woods for about $25 million. So we probably only needed $1 million or so. Oh, wow. In between, an NFL football player, retired NFL football player, and I think I mentioned they had just sold an apartment community that made them several $1 million, and they kind of just like, we can't believe we just did this. And so they had capital, I had capital, my dad had capital, and the banks were comfortable with our ability, so long as we signed those bank loans, with our ability to borrow the roughly 95% loan to cost. And so the capital stack was pretty much all debt, and we generated enough cash flow through the lease up to we didn't have to put any operating capital in those entities either. So, and that's another thing I liked about the business, is that it's a capital intensive business, but the banking environment looked a lot more favorably on, let's just say, loaning the Wrenn boys money to build an apartment building, as compared to the scrutiny that we went through the entire time I was in the waste management business, which is, these garbage trucks are $150,000. These dumpsters are $1,000 a piece. And it was as a matter of fact, it was impossible to get banks. We never got a bank loan in the garbage business. It was always niche, commercial lending companies that understood the business and knew how to look at your balance sheet and say, well, that balance sheet looks awful, but we understand that the value in the company is the recurring revenue that you have, your customer list, if you will, your customer contracts, coupled with your the fair market value of your assets. Yeah. So typically, if you sell a garbage business, which we sold them all, it would be a multiple of monthly billings. Is kind of what that would be. That would be, what that multiple, it might be 18 times your monthly revenue. It might be 30 times your monthly revenue, but it was typically somewhere in between there.
Interesting.
So yeah.
How did the real estate business evolve over time? So you walked through those couple deals, those first 2 or 3 deals, right? What happens after that? And obviously, we're leading up to the Bowen kind of foundation here.
I don't know if you remember, Matt, but the early 2000s through the mid to late 2000s, there was a big wave of what I remember we called as apartment conversion. So there was a condominium craze that went on. We called them commodity condos because they were basically apartment communities
deconverted to condos
that would convert. Yeah, basically the owner of the apartment community, and this didn't happen necessarily nationwide, but it happened in certain markets. Charleston is a special type of market. It's got a great climate. It's got the beaches. It's got the downtown. It's got a lot of charisma and magnetism and desirability and quality of life. And so you could take an apartment complex in James Island that's, right across the bridge from downtown and very close to Folly Beach. And the owner could see a lot more value in selling those apartments as condominiums. And they could sell those apartments as condominiums for a lot more money, maybe $20,000 or $30,000 more per apartment than they can sell them to another apartment buyer, to somebody who's doing an apartment roll-up or on an acquisition trail. And so during that condo craze that lasted about 6 or 8 years, if I recall correctly, we built 224 condominiums, apartment-sized condominiums, in Mount Pleasant, and then close to 300 in James Island.
Oh wow!
So we had that 6 to 8 year period that we saw the moving from, instead of just building apartments and keeping those, let's just build the condos. And so those 2 deals happened. I think there were 575 or so units that we developed and sold in the Charleston area. And then about when that was kind of simmering down, which was 2007, 2008, that's when we had already begun acquiring land in Hanahan. And in 2006, we had worked out a plan development agreement with or plan development zoning with the city of Hanahan. And we had identified 12 or 13 tracts of land that, if aggregated, could all be situated within proximity to about a half a mile of waterfront on a tributary off the Cooper River. Yeah. So it made it navigable water to the ocean. That made it particularly attractive for us. So we kind of pumped the brakes and said, let's spend what we thought would be 2 or 3 years acquiring all the land around it. That ended up taking 8 or 10 years to do the acquisition. Sometimes I think about all of the things I could have done while I was investing my capital, all of my capital, almost all of it, into literally paying cash for all this land in Hanahan. And the reason we had to pay cash, because it was called heirs property, so it was not financeable. You had to actually get a court order at the completion of your identification and negotiation with all of the heirs that own the property. So we bought 172 heirs out to complete the aggregate acquisition of all of those parcels that went into what is now the Bowen PD. The entity that we set up to do that acquisition work was called Foster Creek LLC, and it's because Foster Creek Road terminated within one of those parcels there. So Foster Creek / Bowen cut its zoning deal with the city, and then it went about its business to acquire this land over the next few years. and a lot more soft costs and a lot more acquisitional costs than we had anticipated, because we thought there might be 30 or 40 people that we would have to identify and buy, but there was over 170, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. And the heirs laws changed midway through that. So about halfway through that process, the state legislature mandated that we actually treat each of those heirs transactions as a real estate closing, which means you have to do all the things that if you're going to sell your house and use a realtor, you have to have a closing, and there are certain rules for that closing. Everybody's got to have an attorney or waive their ability to have an attorney. So it got real expensive real quick. But I tell everybody we were pregnant with it, after 3 years. So, we had to carry it all the way through the end of the pregnancy. And then at the end of that period, we finally started building Bowen.
So back to the original, kind of the original time period here. So 2004, it seemed like, is when you started acquiring tracts of land.
Correct.
How did the area come to you as several tracts of land of interest, and how did you have the vision to build this community or product? Like what I guess was
That's a great
process?
question. That's a great question. Well, the person that came to me was a realtor, and we had our offices when we were doing the condominiums. Our offices were on Bowen Road in Mount Pleasant, and one of the realtors that worked in that executive office building came to me, and she said, "I just ran across 24 acres of land on the Cooper River in Hanahan." I'm going like, where in the world? Because I'm from Hanahan. I grew up in Hanahan.
Sure.
And so where in the world is that? So we went and looked at it, and we ended up buying that piece. And then it was surrounded by junk cars. It was a really kind of a bad situation. There wasn't even any roadways other than a dirt road.
Or utilities?
No utilities. No. Well, there were power lines that ran across some of the property, but we had access to water. We had no sewer. So we ended up building a sewer lift station, which is part of your infrastructural costs. But
so this was just one tract, you're saying?
We started with one.
Which was what, 26-ish?
About 24 acres.
Okay. So, and the total amount is what, 194 or something?
It's about 94 acres, yeah.
So decent little chunk. So then what happens after that? You get a good piece.
Well, I tell you what happened real quickly was I guess it was 2009. Yeah. When what hit the fan, and we had the mortgage crisis, and stock market crash, and it was one of the worst crashes in the economy, or economic downturns, if you will. It was multifaceted. One of the big things that happened out of that was banks reallocated where their priorities were, and of course, some of this land we had in a really big land loan. Some of this land we paid cash for. The parcels that we bought that were not heirs property, we were able to borrow money for those, and the ones were not, we had to pay cash throughout those. And so, what hit the fan in 2009, and that caused us about 3 years of delays, because number one, the only thing that we had was the land, and we did have a little over $10 million in land loan debt. And the bank, I won't mention the name of the bank, but the bank called the loan. It was a conforming loan, which means there was no payment problems. So they call me and say, "Mr. Wrenn, we're gonna have to call your loan." I said, "You talking about the land loan?" He said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, where's Mike and where's Al, the people that were running the whole state of North Carolina?" Well, they're no longer with us. And I could tell the guy on the phone with me was much younger than me. I think he was probably in his 20s. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Well, I'm in what they call the workout department." I said, "Oh my goodness, I've heard of the workout department." So I was able to, over about a year of time, replace that land loan with another bank, and I won't mention his name either because I didn't get his permission. I was actually at Pinehurst with the CEO last week, and I thanked him again for that land loan that he did for me in 2009. Trust me, I thank him every time I see him. So anyway, he saved our life, and that bank is still, our flagship bank. I still have the same exact relationships with the bank, even though it's a different bank, but the principals of the bank have moved on, and I've followed them to whatever bank they've gone to. So So we had all the delays associated with the protracted nature of more heirs than we thought, the heirs laws changing, and then the economic downturn that happened, the stock market crash, mortgage crisis. So we lost 5, 6, 7 years. And right before all that happened, we were in a period of extraordinary returns. I mean, a lot of things were really doing good. The stock market was doing good. Real estate was doing good. Apartments were doing good. And so we really started construction. I think that's what you're getting to. We started construction in around 2010 is when we started. And the builder there was one of the largest builders in the country that built the first phase of apartments. It's called the Channel at Bowen. And he said we were the first apartment community. And he was one of the biggest builders in the Southeast. I know that, maybe in the country. But he said this is the first deal that they started in something like 18 months. That's how the brakes came upon the apartment business, and I'm sure it happened in other factions of the commercial real estate. But so anyway, so that's when we started thinking we can monetize now. We can actually start creating revenue after having been almost 10 years of no revenue. But we still had to get through the construction. You know, you've got a construction budget. You got to hit those numbers, and that worked out. That worked out adequately, and a lot of people, lenders, were telling me, you know, we're not really comfortable with building apartments in Hanahan because, you know, we can see what you would get if you built those apartments in West Ashley or Mount Pleasant or even parts of Somerville. But, you know, everything we see in Hanahan is we don't see anybody getting anywhere near the kind of rents you're going to need to get in Hanahan. And I would convince them, and ultimately did successfully convince them, that Hanahan is different. That there hasn't been any new apartments built in Hanahan in over 25 years. And the one that was built 25 years ago is in a relatively new part of Hanahan called Eagles Landing. It was called Audubon Park. And so I really had to, you know, do the magic with the appraisers and the bankers and say, please, you got to trust me on this. So the same bank I was begging to do the land loan, I begged to do that first apartment loan in Hanahan. And that worked out pretty well. It was a little slow start on the lease up, and then we went and built another phase called Channel Park, and then we ultimately built another phase called Channel Pier House. We built 40 cottages. We built a couple mixed-use buildings that have businesses on the ground floors, and one of the buildings has businesses on the second floor also. And so now we're kind of bringing in that sort of mix of business, the mixed-use component of it. In the last 2 or 3 years, we brought that in, and we did sell 12 acres or so to a builder, single-family residential builder, for a capital raise, and they built, I think, 65 homes in Bowen, which is the little district there. It's called the Estuary, and then we built 25 homes there, and we built 36 condominiums there. So that, I think, all those things I just mentioned to you is pretty much the culmination and the totality of what's there at Bowen now. In the future, there's a lot more to do. I'll see if you have any more questions or comments about what we just went over, and we'll talk about the future. So is everything clear to you now?
No,
so far?
I follow. This is good. So what was the initial design, maybe process or planning? So we have the condos that are in there. You have the Channel apartments, and then you have all these residential lots that you broke off and sold to kind of recapitalize the project. What was your vision for the community itself? Like, what was important to you? Being a walkable community, there's mixed use. There's on the website, if you go to the Bowen website, there's a heavy focus on, the kind of live work. Like, there's office space available to rent, and we have some restaurants that are open there too. So what was your, maybe not architectural, but like, what was your design philosophy of, hey, what do I want to provide out of this land that we accumulated? Yeah, and then we can go through the capitalization.
I think you've detected a shift from more of a traditional neighborhood design. That's TND is what they're called. Some people call them mixed-use communities, but I know that in the state legislature they actually call these type of developments PUDs, or traditional neighborhood designs. So my first learning period in the real estate business was when I learned about apartments. And then when we were doing the acquisition of land, and when I realized that it wasn't going to be a 2-year process, it was going to be a multi-year process, then I kind of embarked on my second learning period in real estate. And I passionately studied these mixed-use traditional neighborhood designs. One of the ones that I really studied hard was Ion in Mount Pleasant. Vince Graham was kind enough to spend a fair amount of time with me. I attended classes at Harvard. Harvard has a curriculum for these kind of things. So I'm kind of hurry up and wait mode. So what am I going to do with this time? We went to one of the communities that I really love. I think I've been there a half a dozen times, literally with the little pointers with the light rays and the pointers, and you're measuring, the distances of the roads, the widths of the roads, the widths of the alleys. How far is this building from the next one? There's so many metrics that go into geometry, just like they say there's metrics that go into, I saw one time, I think a Time magazine had the metrics of somebody's face, what makes somebody really nice looking, what makes an attractive human face. And it really boils down to metrics, distance between the eyes, all those kind of things that go. Well, those same metrics apply to neighborhoods. And if you look at an urban design, and if you want to picture in your mind, because most of your listeners and yourself too, Matt, can think of downtown Charleston. If you look at downtown Charleston, what is it that is metrically different in downtown Charleston, other than the architecture, about the design, about the dimensions, as compared to what I would call cul-de-sac USA, which is the suburbanization. And by the way, another great teacher was Andres Duane. I never met Andres. I think I actually did shake his hand one time, but it wasn't much of a meeting. But he wrote a wonderful book called Suburban Nation. You can YouTube him. He's on lots of podcasts. But he lays out so many of the far-reaching benefits of the urban design that goes into these traditional neighborhood developments. And the things that you see if you go into downtown Charleston, if you go into Seaside, Florida, if you go into Ion, is the buildings tend to engage the road. The public realm consists of typically the sidewalks, the parks, and whatever amenities, even though some of those amenities might be private, so semi-public realm. But what you're doing is you're creating, as you would walk down King Street or walk down East Bay Street. The public realm is the streets and the wide sidewalks and all that are in front of the shops, and then the sidewalks narrow down as you go through the neighborhoods. Typically, there's street side parking. Lots of times, somebody's going to go to Colonial Park. Well, they're going to park on the street somewhere. It might be right against the park or one of the other mini parks in downtown Charleston. So you create this public realm, and then there's another concept called placemaking. And placemaking is within your parks, your amenities, and your public realm, defining what it is that you want people to be able to do in those places. An example of placemaking would be in the next phase we're going to do in the Bowen market, which is the sort of the core mixed-use commercial part of Bowen, which the Brew Coffee Shop, the Domino's Pizza, Nigel's Restaurant, all of those. Have you been over there, by the way, yet?
I was going to today. Actually, I just had Vince Graham on this morning.
Did you have him on this morning?
That's why I was curious if your inspiration came from Ion, because I saw the similarities.
Well, the great thing about Ion is it was in our backyard, and I can only think of one. I can only think of one modern era community that I would put under this classification that has enough gravitas, enough magnitude. So Ion, if I remember correctly, I think it was 250 acres, about 750 homes. But Vince was not able to get town of Mount Pleasant to allow multifamily in Ion. Yeah. Now Bowen, as a difference, Bowen has the multifamily. Which is fascinating,
and condos too, and obviously
yes, more mixed use. Multifamily. So Bowen was actually designed primarily as a multifamily development.
Interesting.
Hanahan is a municipality that is surrounded by, bordered by North Charleston on one side, Goose Creek on the other side, and the rest of it is, for lack of a word, either water over or government property that's owned typically by the Naval Weapons Station. So if you look at annexation in Mount Pleasant, well, they can go right down Highway 17. There's other places they can go. Somerville has the opportunity to annex into downtown Charleston. Moncks Corner can annex. Goose Creek can annex. Annexation is never an easy thing to do, but it's almost impossible in Hanahan. So this was something that was known in 2006 when the city council granted our PD rights, our property rights containing the PD, and it's known now, probably now more than ever. So in order for Hanahan to grow and to be able to pay its police persons and its city staff and the fire people and all the people work on the sanitation crew, public works, they have to see job growth opportunities. They have to see raise opportunities, where they can get promotions and they can get raises in pay even if they don't get a promotion. And historically, Hanahan has struggled with how to pay its people. It's not been able to pay as much as a municipality with more healthy growth, annexation possibilities. So Hanahan has realized that it has to densify. It has to become more dense, and so that lends into what kind of growth? And people use the term smart growth. Smart growth. So smart growth is the answer. Bowen, I think, is the epitome. Ion is the epitome of smart growth, and the great opportunity is like downtown Charleston. Bowen is literally going to have over 3,000 people living within a 7-minute walk of each other. So you can walk from any border of Bowen, outside limits of Bowen, the 94 acres, and you can be within 5 minutes to all of the businesses that are there now, in addition to all the businesses that are going to be built in the Bowen market. We're even going to put a 4,000 square foot artificial turf square there with a stage for music. And so being able to have community events like, Park Circle is something that came alive in North Charleston. My friend Brian Mahoney was one of the first people that invested in Park Circle, and he started the restaurant Dig in the Park. Well, Dig came from Daniel Island Grill. That was his first grill. Oh, wow. And Brian actually sold condominiums for me in Mount Pleasant, so he was in the real estate business. So when the real estate market hit the fan, Brian had family and personal experience in the restaurant business, so he went right over to Daniel Island, being the great entrepreneur and businessman that he is, and started a very successful bar and grill called the Daniel Island Grill, which became Dig in the Park. Oh, wow. And Dig in the Park was one of the first hugely successful restaurants on that main street in Park Circle. And that's taken on a life of its own. So you go to, St. Patty's Day, they close it down. They close the roads down. July 4th, they have all types of events throughout the year. And what that is a gathering place. And it's a place that adds quality of life to people that live in the community and nearby. And even they call it elasticity. They have a greater degree of elasticity, meaning that it wouldn't be unusual for someone that lives in Orangeburg or Greenville to go, I heard Park Circle has 10,000 people and they have, a full day of 5 bands playing in the open field and they close the roads down. Let's go to Charleston and let's do St. Patty's Day in Park Circle. That's the elasticity. Right. Vince might have talked about some of these things to you also. So you look at Ion, Seaside, Florida, which is where they filmed The Truman Show with Jim Carrey. That's probably a 20-something-year-old movie. But if you look at it, it looks like a set. Well, it's not. It's an actual community on the Panhandle in Florida. And I've been there many times with engineers, civil engineers, going, let's measure everything we can there, and let's duplicate it, but let's make sure we understand what we're doing. Sure. So we did the same thing for Ion. We did the same thing. We even went and studied Wild Dunes because I lived there for 12 years, and I like certain things because that's sort of got a resort element to it. So, being that it's oceanfront. So we sort of combined the things we loved about Ion and downtown Charleston and Daniel Island and Wild Dunes and Seaside, Florida, and several other, Habersham and Beaufort. We visited. So while we were waiting for this property to be legally acquired, and then again waiting for this banking crisis to subside and the market cycle to come back into our favor, we had a lot of time to do all of this scientific work, if you will. And I think that it shows when you go into Bowen, you can see that work is in the DNA of Bowen. And so all of the things that I think are the most exciting parts of Bowen are in the future, because we focused the first few years of getting heads on beds. In other words, we've got several hundred apartments there now.
How many total apartments?
Total now, I think there's about, I don't reserve this to memory, but I could figure it out. But I think it's about 350, 375 rental apartments there. We've got those 40 cottages there. So all in rentals.
Are those built to rent, the cottages?
Yes. Okay. We built 40 cottages just to rent. And a lot of why we did those cottages was not only proliferating our product, but also making the community look less homogeneous, more diverse, architecturally, dimensionally, color-wise, making Bowen, and it's a great transitional product between an apartment building and a single-family home.
Absolutely.
The cottages are real close together, and so they add a varietal for the eye, for the aesthetics piece of riding through there. And so many people that ride through there, especially those that haven't seen it since we built the cottages or since we built the first phase or whatever, they go through there now. Now it's taken form, Ray. Now we can see what you're talking about, because I would talk about it endlessly to anybody who would listen, in the early days.
Absolutely.
Because I would see these communities and I would just dream and envision us converting something in my hometown of Hanahan that looked anything like these things. A little piece of Park Circle, a little piece of Ion, a little piece of Wild Dunes, a little piece of downtown Charleston, and just putting it all in a pot and stirring it up and pouring it out right here in Hanahan.
So what percentage would you say that the community has done? 40, 50%?
I think I'd say 40 to 50%, whether you're measuring on units or square footage. I'd say square footage wise, we're probably 40, 45% done.
So as far as Bowen, and we were chatting a little before, it sounds like you may have potentially another project coming up too. But as far as Bowen goes, what is left to develop? It seemed like there's some waterfronts still, lots to do. But what do you have envisioned for what's left to complete Bowen?
We are well. First of all, the Bowen site was not a commercial site by any stretch of the imagination. It's too far off of North Rhett. Tannerford Boulevard doesn't generate enough traffic, especially in the middle of the day, to justify what you go to the Harvard course that I go to is a retail course. Yep. You would look at the modeling that they do, and you look at that site and plug into their model, it would go, it would kick it out and say, no, this doesn't work. Go find another site.
Right.
But if we incubate and put people living there, so if we can get to 2,500 to 3,000 people living there, which I think we're probably at about 1,500 now, then you have sort of
it supports its own commercial.
It doesn't support its own, but the supplemental nature of what's there. The people that literally don't have to get into an automobile to go either visit their neighbor or go get their coffee or go have drinks at Nigel's at happy hour or go to whatever they're doing. And we've got plans to build a church there. We've got plans to build on the waterfront, which will have enormous elasticity. We've got my friend John Keener, who signed a letter of intent to put a Charleston Crab House on the waterfront. We've got my friend Matt Hensley, who is signed a letter of intent. Now, these letter of intents have to go through stringent negotiations, so the devil's in the details, as they say. A letter of intent is just that, a non-binding document, but it shows intent. So Charleston Beer Works is another staple, bar and grill of Charleston. There's one in the airport for people that come through the Charleston airport. So that and other waterfront restaurants and businesses, we see that being a reality, as well as the land, the 8 or 10 acres of land that fronts Tannerford Boulevard. So when you add all the heads on the beds, the people that live in the condos, the apartments, the single-family residences, they will be so close. It's just very, very compelling for them to not get in their car and just stay local. And the more critical mass we get, just like it happened in Park Circle right after my friend, I was telling you, Brian Mahoney opened his restaurant in Park Circle, more and more restaurants came along because they saw the success of that restaurant. Say, we want. One. That's right. Yeah. That's who the risk taker is. And so that's why I'm so thankful for Nigel, for starting Nigel's there, and for Laura Gresham and all the other people that have started businesses in Hanahan. at Bowen, and there will be many more. We think we'll have 40 or 50 more businesses in Hanahan. And I don't know how many businesses Hanahan has, at least commercial. I'm not talking about the industrial part, which is over on North Red and other parts. Hanahan has some industrial sections, but the true commercial, the downtown component, has never been there in Hanahan. Yeamans Hall Road is kind of what's been the old downtown, but it wasn't zoned properly. It wasn't designed properly. And those buildings that are there somehow have to be retrofitted or demolished and rebuilt. Hanahan, the city council from Hanahan, I think has done a good job of rezoning that land and creating opportunities for people to invest. But it's not the same ease as working from a blank canvas like Bowen is. We literally have the land. We have none of those obstacles to deal with. So we think that the aggregate amount of commercial businesses in Hanahan are going to end up in Bowen. It's going to be the sort of the downtown for Hanahan, yeah. And the waterfront, there's plans that are no secret. This is public information that even envision adjoining the older part of Hanahan, which is across the creek and across the marsh, which is the area that you and I are sitting in now. We're at my home now. Right. And my childhood home is a mile down the road on this side of the water in the marsh. So on the other side is where Tanner Plantation is. And so there's plans that I'm actually involved with a excellent Harvard sanctioned Charlotte-based firm to help design everything from the grant part of it to the structural part of it. A sophisticated boardwalk system where people can drive golf carts, electric bikes, bicycles, or walk over to the Tanner side, maybe the Bowen waterfront from the older part of Hanahan. And there would be sort of domiciles at the beginnings of those boardwalks where you can kind of drive your car, your whatever, and you park it and then walk over to Bowen, be a 5-10 minute walk. Even adjoining the amphitheater. Hanahan's got an excellent amphitheater in the old Hanahan part, where a lot of ball fields are, little league ball fields, softball, baseball, soccer, and the other sports that they play. So adjoining these boardwalk systems to connect, and also create so much more safe exercise opportunity for people, and the people that are lazy like me that would choose the golf carts. We'll have them designed wide enough for the golf carts too. At least that's the plan. Now, whether that comes to fruition in the next 2 or 3 years, I don't know, but I think it's going to happen eventually. And you put all these pieces together, coupled with, what might be a renaissance of the Yeamans Hall section of where the city hall is located now. Hanahan could turn into a real high visible place to visit. Hanahan doesn't have a bed and breakfast. They don't have a hotel, So if you graduate from Hanahan in 2024 and you come back 6 years and you want to get married, or 10 years you want to get. Actually, people are not getting married that quickly these days. So you come back 12 years, you want to get married. It'd be nice to have a place where you could rent 12 rooms and have a rooftop bar on the waterfront, and you could say, "This is where I'm from. I'm from Hanahan," and it doesn't have those things. Over $90 million according to the mayor. And I believe she got this information from the Chamber of Commerce. And so don't quote me on this, but I believe what I heard was over $90 million of restaurant money leaves Hanahan to go outside of Hanahan every year. Wow. So that's how much money that Hanahan business could be, even if they got half of that, $45 million or a third of that. But Hanahan only has one restaurant, I think, for it was over 2,000 people. It's probably down to 1,600 or 1,800 people, where Mount Pleasant has a restaurant for I believe I heard 400 people. Hanahan has a restaurant for over 1,500 people. So it's sparse when it comes to choice options. And having all of those businesses so close together, centrally located, very close to all of these residences, whether they be rental or ownership residences, also keeps cars off the road. So there's basically a small city who might have 12 restaurants that they can go to, and not a one of them has to get in their car. Right. So that, if you start analyzing traffic and transportation and infrastructure, things like Bowen can actually put a real dent in the demand for infrastructure, coupled with the fact that we own our own roads in Bowen. So That doesn't come out of taxpayers' pockets. The sewer system didn't come out of the taxpayers' pockets. And a lot of the infrastructure, even some of the off-site road work that we've done that's not even on our property, and the signalization that we paid for, has been a no burden factor for the taxpayers in Hanahan. So it's a good deal for the citizens, and certainly a good deal for the government of Hanahan.
Certainly so. As far as remaining product that you want to go in to Bowen, is there going to be more single family homes, and are you going to sell those lots direct to consumer, or are those lots going to be sold to builders that can take them down and build spec or custom? What's the remaining? We
always, just like we sold the land to a builder, a single family builder in their estuary, we never say no to that. I'm 63 years old, so I'm no spring chicken anymore. My daughter, who I'm very proud of, Sarah Wrenn, or she goes by Sarah Wrenn, and her married name is something else, but business-wise, it's something I learned that sometimes kids do that. If they're working in a family business, they just keep, for the businesses, they keep the family name. Yeah. So Sarah is our executive director. She worked for Deloitte Consulting in Washington for 7 years directly out of college at Clemson. So she's brainwashed, like we Carolina, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia people start taking those kids to the games early and get them used to the mascot and the pom-poms and the cheerleading outfits and all the festivities that these colleges do such a great job of promoting and building loyalty at a young age. So yeah, she was a brainwashed Tiger girl, and so she's going to have a lot to do with what happens in the future. A lot of it's going to be her tolerance for risk, her social values, her social goals. There's all types of ways. She's very prideful in social aspects of development. For example, she's very in tune with the crisis of housing, where so many people cannot afford to buy a home, and there's a sort of a NIMBY effort that's pushing apartments further and further out. So people that work at the restaurants and the hotels and the police forces and the teachers and people that sort of have defined salaries with limited upside, they continue to have to move further and further out, and then that adds to transportation woes because they got to commute into work. So Sarah is very concerned with the social aspects of development, and I'm going to lean on her and her beliefs because I want her to have her heart in this business just the same way I've always had my heart in the waste management companies. I mean, I would turn around on a busy street and behind a new shopping center to see how many dumpsters were ours in that shop. You know what I mean? So it's that passion that has led me and driven me more than anything, certainly more than the money, and doing something in her father's hometown. She grew up in Mount Pleasant, but in Isle of Palms, but doing something in her father and her mother. Her mother grew up in Hanahan also. So she has a unique and special interest and desire to continue to do what we're doing. But I think that to more specifically answer your question, I think we will have some more single family residences in Bowen. We'll certainly have more condominiums. There will have a lot more home ownership. We'll have more multifamily for rent, more apartments for rent. But most importantly, we want to have more mixed use. We want to build a waterfront component. If you think of Shem Creek, that's just a purely waterfront deal, and there's some residences there, but it's primarily commercial. It's got that little inn, that Shem Creek Inn, which I actually stayed there on not July 4th, but Memorial Day. I actually stayed there for 4 days and 3 nights. Cool. Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. And so, and I would, imagine what if we had something like this on the waterfront in Hanahan, and the whole top floor was, the graduating class of 2018 from Hanahan, and they had, the whole wedding party, the whole deal. You could basically rent out a whole floor and take pride in the fact this is my hometown, and get married maybe in a church in Hanahan, or maybe even the church that we're going to build in Bowen. Those type of things galvanize a community, just like winning baseball and football championships galvanize a small community. I mean, it's made some of those little small towns in Texas famous because of their dadgum football team, Friday Night Lights, right? So all of these are the components, I think, to building community, which we're vested in, and we're continue to invest in. Had the football coach over here the other afternoon talking about 2024 season and what's he looking like. Tell us about which kids might be getting scholarships and what are we going to do about losing our star running back Kevon. And so he's going to Catawba to play on a scholarship next year. He actually works for me when he's home. Yeah, he comes over. He helps me with keeping the house in order. So, so all of those things are the dynamics of a healthy community, and we want to see Hanahan prosper and grow in a smart way. And so, so that's kind of the Bowen story. I think the best of Bowen is coming now that we've sort of got the heads on the beds. We've got that not all the critical mass we need, but we got some of it. And it's just going to give those businesses a chance to be successful. Remember, we're not on a main thoroughfare.
Of course.
So we're trying to give the businesses that will be and that are in Bowen the chance to have that incubated audience, that captive audience that's right down to their nose, that they can build relationships not only in their businesses, but also in the coffee shop next door or in the park where they, where they're taking their kids on a stroller ride or taking their dog out to, to use the bathroom. We got lots of doggy parks. We're getting ready to build another one next week too in Bowen. So yeah, I think that's a lot of the story of Bowen. It's hard to describe how excited I am and how beautiful I think it's going to be and how healthy it's going to be for the Hanahan economy and the Charleston and the Lowcountry economy as well. And how good it's going to be for the people that work for the city of Hanahan, and the people that work in the city. So it's part of what drives us.
And it already seems wildly successful. Already has been.
We've been lucky.
I think that's a great place to tie up on Bowen. In wrapping up lightly, you mentioned that maybe there's another project on the radar. I don't know if you can talk about it.
Yeah.
What are you focused
I don't
on
mind
now,
talking about it. No,
so
we've acquired some land on opposite side of the marsh, which is in this side of town that we're talking right now. That we just mentioned that a minute ago. And it's not nearly as big, but it's beautiful land. It's currently a mobile home park. We're going to try to figure out a way to displace those people. Luckily, it only has, 8 or 10 or 12 mobile homes on it now. And, I've told those people, don't worry, you're not going to be asked to move out anytime in the future. We still have to do a lot of work to get that development started. And so, the land is contiguous to what was the first pump station. A pump station is a term that they used to use for what they now call waterworks or water stations or Charleston Water Systems is what the one is called now, and it is now Charleston Water Systems. But it was where the water was generated and transported. For example, to downtown Charleston, it was the first pump station, and it was called the Saxon Pump Station. We're going to call the development Saxon. And I believe that there's another community in a small town, I believe, somewhere in Kentucky or Virginia, and they kept getting each other's mail, back in the 1900s, mid 1900s. So at some point they changed, and they changed the Saxon. I might be telling that story incorrectly, but let me just say this. The point that I was getting to is that the then chairman of the Saxon board's name was Ross Hanahan, and they named Hanahan after the man who was the chairman of the board at that pump station. Oh, so I might have messed up the Saxon story. I read that thing about 3 years ago, but we're going to call it Saxon, and it's going to be mixed use. We have about 600 linear feet of waterfront, and what makes it really unique is it's elevated up, I think, 12 to 15 feet off of the marsh level. So if you can imagine sort of a small cliff, and it's that gives a great opportunity for whatever we build on that waterfront. And we haven't decided. We've got our ideas that it would probably be premature for me to speculate right now. But whatever it is, it'll have a beautiful view over the marsh. And it'll have a perfect view of the Bowen waterfront. And who knows, we might even combine the amenities there, or maybe have a ferry boat that drives back and forth, maybe a maybe midnight rooftop restaurants or whatever, and somehow you'd be a 5-course dinner. You eat your first course on this rooftop, that rooftop, and come on and finish up downstairs at the Saxon restaurant. So we somehow combined with the boardwalk system that we've talked about in the Saxon development and the Bowen development, we can see a lot of social value to the citizens of Hanahan and their guests and the people in Charleston.
Amazing.
Yeah, we're excited about it.
It'll be cool to see what comes.
It always takes longer and costs more, so it's not going to happen tomorrow. But we're happy that we were able to purchase that land from actually a friend of mine that I went to high school with. Sold us the land.
Nice.
Yep.
Last couple questions here, Ray, in wrapping up. Is there any asset class, market, or product type that you haven't developed, built, or owned at any point that you would like to at some point in the future?
Well, we like to we'd like to look into the hotel industry. We want to do sort of a co-branding idea where we pick up the name brand of a well-known brand, someone that knows what they're doing, that gives us a higher chance for success. And many of those chains, and I won't mention their names because I haven't done enough research to say much about it, but I know that there's latitude with some of those brands that are allowing there to be sort of a local touch, but still have the brand name. You can even kind of do their logo in a way that's more indigenous to the branding that is at the local community, where it's not sort of, what you would think of as the hotel that you see from the interstate,
Sure.
And they're all the same, where you can actually make it unique and indigenous to the community that you're building in, as well as the overall community. So I can see us getting into that. Other than, what we've done is sort of single family, multifamily, mixed use, and then so multifamily for rent, multifamily for sale. We've done all that. I mean, at age 63, unless my daughter Sarah really wants to go charge in another direction, she's going to have to sell me on it. But I think that we're going to stick, other than the hospitality or hotel piece, I think we're going to stick with what we know. Because there's a demand for that. There always will be. It's going to go through its cycles. We're not looking at really doing a lot of developments in other places right now, because we sort of have a pipeline that's sufficient for another 8 or 10 years for our tolerance for risk, to build another, 1 million or 2 million square feet right here in Hanahan. So that's enough for this boy in terms of the apple he wants to bite off. And I hope Sarah would agree with that, because somebody's got to sign those bank loans.
They do. That they do. Last question for you. In your expansive career through development, who do you think has helped you the most along the way?
You talking about individuals?
Individual, however you want to answer the question. Who did you learn the most from, or who was most impactful in your real estate career?
Well, well, first of all, I have to say my father. Mm-hmm. My father taught me how to dream. My mom and I always joke. My mother lives in Bowen, and so does my sister. My sister Tracy works with us. She's been working with me her whole career, and so it's very much a family business. My mother just moved from Mount Pleasant to Bowen, and she loves it here. She lives in a little place called Sarah's Court, which is the 25 single-family homes that we built there. So my father was probably my biggest inspiration. I'm trying to think. There's so many. The Bostic brothers. I have to give them the credit for, playing golf that one fateful day in Wild Dunes, which I still love to play golf in Wild Dunes. We took our maintenance crew on my boat here in the backyard 3 weeks ago to play golf in Wild Dunes, and they just loved it. They only one of them had ever played much golf, but we had a great time, and we played on the course that my daughter Sarah grew up on, and I lived there for most of her childhood, and so I'm thankful for the city council in Hanahan in 2006 for having the vision, and thankful for those in the city that still have the vision. But there's so many. I mean, I can think of Ray Case, who is no longer with us. His son Brent is a realtor, developer in town. He just upgraded one of the strip centers here in Hanahan. His father was a mentor of mine. There's been a lot of them. I feel like I'm missing somebody, but Vince Graham. I tell you that even with the little time I spent with Vince, has been very, very, very impactful. All of the property we don't manage any of our property; we outsource all that. Yeah. So a lot of the information I've learned about property management has come from the regionals, the line managers, and the CEOs, presidents and owners of the property management companies that we've worked with, and a lot of us architects, engineers, land planners. Mark Brodeur, working with him with the COG right now. He's got 40 plus years of experience in zoning and land planning, and he spent a good bit of his career in California, and so, he just got a ton of ideas for us. And so there's just too many to mention. I hope I haven't left anybody. I probably have. Fred Skipper, who works with us, is who's my next meeting. He's taught me a lot from his perspective. And so, thankful for everybody that's been a part of, thankful for all of our lenders, the ones that took a chance on us, when times weren't tough. And it's easy to do loans when nobody's looking over your shoulder as a lender, and nobody's going to say, I told you so, So, the courage of, so many people, that have crossed our path, we're very, very thankful for.
It's amazing.
So, yeah.
I think that's a great
Thankful
place
for you being here today, too.
I appreciate that. Thanks for coming on the show. I think that's a good place to wrap. Anything else you wanted to put on there?
No, I'm good. I'd say go Hawks. The Hanahan Hawks.
I love it.
All right.
Thanks for coming on the show, Ray. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.